Psychology Behind Stories. Episode 3. What if the most dangerous part of you is the part you never let exist? There is a mental disorder that has fascinated the public for decades. It appears in scientific literature, best-selling novels, films, documentaries, and endless internet discussions. The idea itself is irresistible, that a single person could somehow become many. Yet despite this fascination, most psychotherapists will never encounter a clear-cut case during their entire careers, not because the disorder is fictional, but because reality is much quieter than the stories we tell about it. When people hear the words multiple personalities, they imagine dramatic transformations, different names, different voices, different lives hidden inside the same body. Reality is far less dramatic, but far more tragic. Dissociative identity disorder is not a disorder of excess. It is a disorder of survival. The clinical definition is precise: a disruption of identity involving two or more distinct personality states, accompanied by significant gaps in memory, perception, behavior, and the sense of self. But it tells us very little about what it actually feels like to live through. Imagine waking up and finding evidence of conversations you don't remember having, purchases you don't remember making, messages written in your own words that feel like they were written by someone else. Imagine discovering fragments of your own life the way an archaeologist discovers a lost civilization, piece by piece, without ever knowing who built it. The mind is remarkably resilient, but resilience has a cost. When overwhelming experiences cannot be processed, cannot be survived psychologically, the mind doesn't always break. Sometimes it adapts. Sometimes it creates distance. Sometimes it hides memories. And in rare cases, it fragments the very thing we experience as a unified self. Current research links DID almost exclusively to severe, chronic childhood trauma, repeated abuse, neglect, overwhelming experiences during the periods when a person is still learning, quite literally, what a self even is. Dissociation begins as protection, a way to create distance from something that feels impossible to endure. What starts as a survival strategy can eventually become a way of organizing reality itself. Memories become separated, emotions become separated, parts of the self become separated. Most of us will never experience dissociation on that scale, but the underlying idea is surprisingly familiar. Every person has thoughts they suppress, emotions they avoid, desires they deny, versions of themselves they would rather not acknowledge. Usually those parts stay in the background. Sometimes they don't. And that is what makes Fight Club such a quietly unsettling psychological story. On the surface, it's a story about underground fighting, masculinity, rebellion against a culture that sells you furniture as a personality. But beneath the violence, something far more personal is happening. The narrator has everything that's supposed to work: a stable career, financial security, an apartment assembled piece by piece from a catalog, each item chosen to complete a picture of a life. And yet, he cannot sleep. Night after night, insomnia erodes his sense of reality. The world begins to feel distant, artificial, unbearably empty. Then he meets Tyler Durden. Tyler is everything the narrator is not: confident where he is insecure, fearless where he is afraid, decisive where he is passive. Tyler says what he wants, takes what he wants, lives without apology. Together, they build Fight Club. What begins as a secret escape from emotional numbness slowly becomes something darker. The club grows, followers appear, rules emerge, and while Tyler's influence expands, the narrator begins experiencing something increasingly disturbing. Lost time, missing memories, conversations he doesn't remember having, actions he can't explain, until he discovers the truth. Tyler Durden was never another man. Tyler was him. Not a friend, not a mentor, not a revolutionary. A fractured part of his own mind. This is where Fight Club stops being a thriller and becomes something else entirely. Because Tyler Durden is so often read as a character, a symbol, a cultural icon, a philosophy with good cheekbones. Psychologically, he is something far more interesting. He is a manifestation, a personification of everything the narrator rejected, suppressed, and buried so completely that it needed a different face just to exist. Tyler is a symptom written so convincingly that millions of people wanted to become him, confident, fearless, untouchable, free from anxiety, from shame, from the low, constant hum of self-doubt. But symptoms are rarely random. Every psychological symptom begins as a solution. Every psychological symptom begins as a solution. The panic attack is a solution. The obsession is a solution. The addiction is a solution. The dissociation is a solution. Each one emerges because the mind is trying to solve a problem that feels impossible to survive any other way. And Tyler Durden may be one of literature's most fascinating examples of that principle. Because the real horror of Fight Club is not that the narrator created another person. The real horror is why he needed to. What was so unbearable about being himself? So unacceptable, so unsafe, that his mind had to move an entire part of him somewhere else. Give it a different name, a different body, a different life? Perhaps Tyler was never the villain. Perhaps he was a message, a reminder that the parts of ourselves we reject don't disappear. They wait. And sometimes, if ignored long enough, they come back wearing a different face. Fight Club leaves us with a question that extends far beyond any diagnosis. If every hidden part of yourself suddenly stood in front of you, would you recognize it? Or would you call it Tyler Durden? This is psychology behind stories. We use literature as a case study, not to review books, but to examine the human behavior that lives inside them. If this made you think, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, and see you next time.